Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the inflection points as well as the unsung heroes that possibly could pop up in this national title game. There's always a couple of things. There's always a couple of plays that are made by guys that you might not know going into the game, and you're definitely going to know after that Monday game. But a lot of different things to kind of pull from this, and we'll see what happens with those things. But now I want to talk about something a little bit different. Apologies with the lower third. I had a little bit of a mistake here. But at the end of the day, I did want to talk about, is this the best shot that Ohio State and Notre Dame will have for a while? You know, it's really hard to kind of get an idea of just how long that will take or just how long people will have between national title appearances. You know, Notre Dame has been since 2012. Ohio State obviously was in it in 2020 against Alabama, was obviously won it in 2014. So Ohio State's been here pretty consistently. So it's hard to say, you know, they're going to go on a decade hiatus or anything like that, but it is a good it's a good question at the very least, and it's definitely a lot of things that could make me believe that maybe these teams won't be in this spot for a while. I'll put it at a while for now because I don't want to put an exact year on this one, but definitely a couple of things that are working against them at least going forward. And we'll start with Ohio State here, and the biggest one is there's no running it back. There's no getting Jack Sawyer, getting JTT, getting Travion Henderson and Mekik Buka, all of those guys. They're out the door, plain and simple. Donovan Jackson's out the door, as is a lot of players are out the door after this year. So you had it. Everyone come back. You had everyone make the decision that they didn't want to go to the NFL, that they wanted to come back and win a national title. You don't win a national title, then you're looking down to 2025 and you're saying, I don't have all those guys. I don't have the anchors of my team anymore, which are Jack Sawyer, Travion Henderson, and Mekik Buka, and so many more guys. Cody Simon is absolutely huge for this team. So overall, obviously Ohio State is going to have Jeremiah Smith, who I think is the best player in the country going into 2025. Caleb Downs, who I could very easily make the argument is the second best player in the country going into 2025. Kenyatta Jackson, and so many more guys that are going to make plays. Talent will not be an issue, but the veteran talent on this team, the veteran leadership on this team was downright special. And it was a huge, huge reason why they were able to get past the Oregon loss, why they were able to get past the Michigan loss. And now you look at this offseason, you're saying, I know all those guys are walking out the door. If we win that game on Monday, it's all worth it. If we win that game on Monday, then everything is okay. You've slid your chips entirely to the center of the table at the beginning of this season. Now it's time to go finish the goal. Obviously, you missed out on the first two goals you set, which were beating Michigan and winning the Big Ten, but you have the moment to get that big-time golden opportunity, and you definitely don't want to miss it, because then you'll look back on this team and say, how did we let that team slip through our fingers? Then we got to talk about quarterback, and I want to make this very, very clear. I think Julian Sain is going to be the quarterback for Ohio State next year, and I think he is going to be a good player. I feel very confident in this kid. The arm talent is very, very clear. He's much that point guard of the offense that a Bryce Young type player was, and he is a guy that I think is going to be very good. The difference is he is a first-time starter. It's the same conversation that we had about Nico Iamaleava going into this season. Was he is very, very talented, and he can do all of the things in the world, and frankly, I think he's going to be remarkably successful at Tennessee. He's also doing all of these things for the very first time. Julian Sain, especially, is doing these things for the very first time because he's going to have to step up to be a massive leader on this team next year. Without all of those guys that are walking out the door, Devin Brown is transferring out, Will Howard obviously going to the NFL, he's going to have to be the guy. Everyone's going to be looking to him at every single practice, and it is not an easy thing to step up into. Now, I think the talent level is ridiculous, and frankly, I think he's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the country in time, but it's a hard position to get right. You never really know what a quarterback looks like until he gets out there on that field, so it's going to be a really interesting thing to watch. It's worked out really well with Will Howard, although midway through the season, I think you would have said it's not working out really well with Will Howard. So the quarterback position is very, very fickle. It's very hard to get set in order, and Ohio State just doesn't have it fully set right now. Love what Julian Sain brings, but it's still a big-time question mark for this team. Then you got Big Ten rivals are elevating. They are getting better day by day, and this is probably the biggest one of the bunch, if I'm being totally honest. I think the talent level is going to be fine at Ohio State. I think Julian Sain will develop into a very good quarterback. these teams aren't going anywhere. Penn State is more up in the air, I think, when you look at the future of Penn State, because if they fall on their face in 2025, then conversations will be had, and that's actually a conversation we'll have tomorrow. But overall, Penn State, Michigan, and Oregon, they're all getting better. They're all playing better football, and then you look at a team like Indiana or a team like Nebraska, they're getting to a point where maybe they're not going to compete for a national title. I don't think they're going to get to the CFP. Indiana obviously can and has, but at the end of the day, I don't think you have this big time gap between you and everyone else now. I think you had it for a very long time. Michigan obviously closed that, but then a couple other teams started closing that as well. So you're in a spot where you're going to have a little bit more leeway to take a couple more losses and still make it into the dance. There's no doubt about that. So you could lose to Penn State. You could lose to Michigan. You could lose to Oregon and still find your way in. But at the end of the day, there are going to be very consistent teams over there in the Big Ten for the next 10 to 5 years. Who's to say that Ohio State's going to get through them every year? And on top of that, who's to say they're going to get through a 12-team or 14-team or 16-team playoff after that? So a lot of different questions, but those guys around them getting a lot better is definitely going to play a big-time part in how Ohio State goes about their business the next little bit, and if they're going to be able to lift a trophy in the next little bit. Then we'll move over to Notre Dame, and I just feel like a philosophy change is coming a little bit with Notre Dame. I don't want to say that they're not going to be a power run team or they're not going to be a team that predicates a lot of things off the run, but you look at the quarterbacks that they have coming in, whether it's Steve Angeli or it's CJ Carr, their ability is passing the ball. That is what they do the best. Now, CJ Carr is a little bit more athletic, has that ability to scoot a little bit, but the downfield passing game, I have to assume is going to be employed a little bit more. Mike Denbrock loves to unlock that when he's the OC. He definitely did at LSU with Jaden Daniels. It's something that he'd love to do at Notre Dame. Now, the other side of that is you don't if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? If you're doing what you want to be doing, if you're scoring points, if you're handling games, if you're controlling games, then you're going to be in a good spot. That being said, if you are a team that can, stretch the field, if you're a Notre Dame team, especially with Marcus Freeman as your head coach, your defense is going to play good football. If you can make a couple of plays downfield per game, you're going to be a nearly impossible team to beat, plain and simple. So, not to say that the philosophy change is wrong. I fully believe that this is the better thing for Notre Dame in the long term. I believe this is going to put them in a much better place when it comes to playmaking down the field, and I think it's going to put them in a better place to win more national championships down the road. But it is something to think about. It is something that will take some time, and whether it's CJ Carr or Steve Angeli, I think it will be a different attack, and it might just take a little bit of time for that offense to get fully in sync, and you might see a little bit of a interesting offense at the very least from Notre Dame next year, and then we'll see how that develops over time with Mike Denbrock as the OC. The anchors of your defense are gone is a huge, huge reason that Notre Dame is staring down a uncertain future at the very least. Now, they're going to have talent. They are not going to suffer on talent in that Notre Dame defense. They have really, really good young guys like Gabriel Rubio on the front end, Jordan Clark on the back end, obviously Christian Gray and Leonard Moore was the guy I was looking for. They have plenty of talent. I'm not necessarily worried about the talent level, but I think we kind of misjudge, I don't want to say underestimate, but sort of misjudge the amount of effect that Xavier Watts has on that field, the amount of effect that Jack Kaiser has on that field, that Howard Cross has on that field. They are the true communicators of this football team, and whenever you make that transition, whenever you move from Xavier Watts to a possible Jordan Clark, or when you move to a Jack Kaiser to a Jaden Osbury, or whatever the future holds at those two positions, it's going to be a little bit different. The communication's going to be a little bit different, and it might just be a little bit worse. It might just be a little bit slower, a little bit, less precise, and that little thing, it won't necessarily kill them, it won't necessarily bury them, but it could very well impact them in those big-time games that they've been able to do so well at keeping everyone in order. Maybe that gets a little bit away from them, at least for next year, and then maybe beyond, depending on how next year goes. And then the tougher scheduling is coming. And everyone that was mad about Notre Dame not scheduling anyone, it is coming, I promise. Notre Dame has done a really good job of scheduling big-time teams coming down the stretch. In 2025, they will play A&M and Miami. A&M, Miami, and Boise State in 2025. In 2026, take a little bit of a hiatus, play Wisconsin and Miami. 2027 they will, or Wisconsin, Miami, and SMU. Just a little add to that 2026. 2027 will be Clemson. That's one that's set. There will be others, obviously. USC is included in all of these, of course. And then you have 2028. It's Texas, Clemson, Miami. They are playing big-time teams coming down the stretch. Syracuse is on pretty much every one of those lists, which seems like a program heading in the right direction. Arkansas is on there a couple of times. That might not be one that worries you every single year, but absolutely is one that could worry you in a couple of different years and be a thorn in your side at different moments. So overall, I do think Notre Dame will have a little bit more leeway when they play a Texas, Clemson, Miami type schedule, but I do think at 10-2 going into that conference championship week where you're sitting on your couch is going to look a whole lot different than 11-1. I would make the argument that if they were 10-2, even with a little bit of a tougher schedule in this year going into that weekend, I think they would have been left out, if I'm being totally honest. I think they would have made the argument for Alabama being in a conference, being in a tougher conference, and they would have put them in. So that is something to think about. It might be that you have a little bit more leeway, but I'm not necessarily sure that you have the leeway that you absolutely need to handle this scheduling. So it's going to get tougher for Notre Dame. Everyone that hated Notre Dame scheduling nobody, I promise you that is changing very, very soon, and that could play a part in their ability to find their way back to a national title anytime soon. But my final take on this, because it's up in the air. I think there's a million different variables to win a national title. So that's the biggest thing, is national titles are hard to come by. So it's not crazy to think that regardless of what these teams do over the next 10 years, that they might not find their way back to this pinnacle. But the reality is Ohio State will have Jeremiah Smith, Caleb Downs, and so many more guys going forward. Notre Dame will have Leonard Moore, Jaden Greathouse, Jeremiah Love. They will have players. They will be fine. I love the two head coaches here, especially Marcus Freeman. These are special moments, though. There's no doubt about that. These are moments that you never know if you're going to get another shot to come back here, especially over the next little bit, especially in these two guys' careers. Jeremiah Smith wants a national title. Jeremiah Love really wants a national title, and they won't have too many more opportunities to get it after this one. So it is a huge moment on Monday. It could be a moment that totally defines what this team is about, and it could be a moment that lives on for quite some time, because you might not have a great shot at one coming up. Now, I do think both these teams will be in the mix, but let's be honest, it's very, very hard to get to the point they did, and these veteran quarterbacks are a huge piece of why they did, and they're out the door. So a lot of different pieces to think about there. Obviously, Ohio State and Notre Dame will be fine. They're not going to go into poverty after this, but definitely something to think about, that Monday might be the last shot they have in a while to lift that trophy to be on the very top of the sport. But we'll talk about that in more detail after everything unfolds, obviously, but it is officially time. We'll get into my national championship pick and preview right after this break, so stick with us.